toxic mold was an article that came out from 60 Minutes. They did a network show on it. It's a media myth, and there is mold out there that has some toxics to it, but it's not necessarily black, okay? So it's really a media myth. So Stachybotrys is the type of mold that they're normally referring to. Doesn't normally grow in the outdoor environment, so we usually don't see it outdoors. We see it more when we have a water damage type situation. Again, the key is to prevent mold from growing indoors. So, common types of mold. We have Penicillium. Penicillium is the first type of mold to grow. So, mold will not grow in the first 3 days. Okay? So, if you have a water event and you dry out that structure within 3 days, you won't have mold growth. So, give you an example. Middle of August, it never rains in August, right, in Oregon. Temperature's about 100 degrees. I got up in the middle of the night, used the sink, left the water running because I guess I was a little tired. Ended up, my wife elbows me and says, God, it's raining. It's not supposed to be raining. I got up, checked it out. There's 2 inches of water on my bathroom floor. Now, most guys don't want to hear their wife knowing that they made a mistake, so I got all the towels, dried the floor really quick. I still heard raining going on. Go downstairs, my kitchen, it's raining and hitting the hardwood floor. All right, dried it all out, no mold growth, because it was dried out within 2 days. Okay? Now, just because it's not dried out within the 3rd day, doesn't mean you're going to have mold growth, but you can have the potential for mold growth. Okay, so the key is if you have something that gets wet, you want to make sure it's dried out within a couple days, and you're not going to have mold growth. Okay, common theme: what causes mold to grow? Water. If we dry out that area within 2 days, we're not going to have mold growth. Okay, this is pretty simple, basic stuff.
So what did you do with the ceiling? Did you put fans in there to blow out the?
Yes.
To dry it out?
Yes. And my wife never, no, she eventually found out. Aspergillus takes about 9 to 13 days. It's a water damage type event. Water damage means that your pipe broke or something broke in your house, or in my case, overflow of a sink. Okay. Aspergillus threatens those with weak immune systems. And then we have Stachybotrys, which is basically your black mold. That takes about 28 days to start growth, and it has to be really wet for a long period of time. So high water activity is what we call it, and an extreme period of time to grow. So we'll run into situations where we're looking at a water event that's been there for quite some time, that's still wet. As a mold remediation company, we're going to take precautions because that is a condition that I may have Stachybotrys. So something that we take precautions on. How can you tell if you have mold? Basically use your senses, most common. If you smell it, then you have it. If you suspect mold but you can't see it, the only way to really determine whether you have it or not is to test for it. Now, as a company, we don't believe in mold sampling except for specific situations. Okay, if I see mold on the wall or in an attic, I'm not required by the EPA or the CDC to spend my client's money to test it. Okay, the EPA and the CDC basically says you need to remove the mold. Okay, that's what their statement is. Don't spend your money on testing it because it doesn't matter what type it is. You need to remove the mold. Okay. So we'll have individuals that are having symptoms of mold or mold-related symptoms. They're having these allergies, headaches in their home. They go to their work and they don't have any symptoms. They come back to their home, they have the same symptoms. We'll do an inspection, don't see any visible mold, don't necessarily smell any, but the only way I can determine whether or not they have a mold issue is to do air sampling. And we're not doing air sampling so much as determining whether they have mold, we're really doing the air sampling to rule out mold, okay, as the cause to the symptoms, so that they can figure out what the next step is. And most of the time when we go into a structure, we have what we call particle counters, and it allows us to sample the air in each room mechanically. And that kind of gives us an idea whether we have a high particle count in one individual room compared to another. Kind of helps us determine where we want to do our sampling. Okay? It's just a tool that we use. So most of the time, again, if somebody has symptoms but we don't see anything, and we do air sampling, it's really to rule out, again, that they don't have mold, so we can determine what their issue actually is. Should we test for mold? Again, no matter what type of mold you have, you need to remove it. Okay? You don't really need to test it. Now, I said there were some exceptions. Huge water damage event, okay, and a lot of mold. I want to do a post-clearance test. All right, I want to make sure that that contractor did their job right, that all that mold is gone. All right, that's a good reason to do some mold testing. Not before, because we already know there's mold there, but afterwards to make sure that the contractor did their work. The other thing, or another time you may do mold testing if you have a landlord-tenant dispute, and say a tenant's trying to break their lease, we may do mold testing then just to verify that there is no mold issues in that structure. Okay? So those are some exceptions of why we do it. But again, if we see it someplace, we're not going to test for it. No federal or state regulations for mold remediation. Anybody want to start a new career? You could basically start tomorrow, put a shingle up and say, hey, I do mold remediation. No federal or state regulations on who does mold remediation. Okay? Yes?
Is that changing with legislation right now?
No, I don't think it's going to change. So, the problem is there's no industry or government standards of what too much mold spores in the air is or is not. That's the main issue. So it's just a continue.
Yeah.
Kind of like if you have asbestos